The Home Tech Podcast is supported by you. To find out more, go to HomeTech.fm/support.
This is the Home Tech Podcast for Friday, August 7th from Denver, Colorado. I'm Jason Griffin.
And from Sarasota, Florida, I'm Seth Johnson. Wow, the voice is gone.
Yeah, you sound terrible.
Hit stop.
I feel like the tables have turned the last... We've had a couple of these episodes where you're sounding extra sultry.
Sultry is not the word for it. Yeah, my voice is... I just talk too much. I had a trip where I drove down to help someone pick up their boat and drove like 4 hours that day, and then talked the whole way there and back, and then I sat down and had some business phone calls at the end of the day. So yeah, my voice was shot yesterday or the day before yesterday, and it hasn't come back. So yeah, I sound like I've been to Cedia though. That's
right. You got the Cedia voice.
Yeah.
That's what I used to sound like in my drinking days after 3 hard nights at Cedia and 3 hard days on the show floor.
Yep. I'm there. I feel your pain.
Wishing you a quick recovery. In brighter news, Seth, was very pleased by a minor surprise in Slack that I don't know if this got anyone else excited. I didn't even see them really announce it. This is the ability to mark threaded replies as unread. Yes, I'm that nerdy.
Threaded replies as unread.
So here's my beef with Slack. I love Slack generally. I find that as far as an asynchronous tool, like Slack really feels like it's built for quick replies. In the moment, you see a message, you reply to it. The problem is often I'm not able to do that. I'm in meetings very often, and so Slack messages are just piling up.
Okay.
Well, and Rashid is responding yep in the chat room. So all right, I'm not alone. I'm not totally crazy being excited by this. So thank you for validating that. The problem I have is that I often will use, if I see a Slack message that I can't respond to in the moment, I'll mark it as unread because I want that little red dot so that I can come back to it. We use Slack extensively at work, so it's our own. We don't use email. So I've got a ton of volume in Slack going on, and I've always had this gripe because threads, you'll have like a red dot with 7 unread messages. The problem with threads is that you couldn't mark them as unread before. So it literally created an environment where I'd see these unread threads piling up, but I would be scared to click on threads because it was like all or nothing. If you clicked on it, your notification would go away. And if there were any messages in there that I needed to respond to later, I would have to use Slack's reminder system, which that could be a whole nother conversation. Not a big fan of that. So anyways, I didn't see an announcement, but they added the ability now to mark a thread as unread. And this is such a small little change that has made a massive difference. So everyone at work was giving me a hard time for celebrating this one.
I don't, Jason, do you think you're using Slack wrong?
No, not possible.
So if Slack is like not for this, it's for like in the moment messaging, right? And like you're using it as like, oh, I need to hold on to this information.
But that's the problem. And Rashid says upside to COVID, I think what he's alluding to is more and more people now working from home. I think Slack is great. I think that being able to respond to messages more in real time is awesome when you can do it, but I can't all the time.
Yeah. So how it seems like it's a missing feature from Slack. It's like it's either a missing feature or it's being used inappropriately.
Do you ever use mark unread like in your email inbox or anything?
I
see. I have this theory where there's like some people who use it and some who would have never even they don't consider that even a thing.
I have a mail program that may do that for me, like under the hood. So Spark can basically, like, I can just say, hold on to this till later and remind me. And it goes into like some kind of pinned area if I wanted to. So
yeah,
I'm not sure. Maybe I've done that.
Yeah, I'll tell you, you're not alone. Everyone at work is like, why are you trying to turn Slack into email?
Yeah.
Jay, like, I don't get it. But I have very strong opinions about this. And ultimately, I think that where Slack's big opportunity to improve is to look at people who work more asynchronously and opportunities to make Slack feel a little bit less like this domineering force where you have to reply to things the moment you see them, and give you better tools for managing coming back to things later. I personally would like to see him add the ability to tag messages and do like custom tags on messages. That's where everybody gives me a really hard time, because that's they're like,
boy.
oh my gosh,
Yeah.
you're trying to turn it into email. But
Yeah, you are at this point.
but yeah, I'd like to see him do more, but this was a big step in the right direction in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, Rashid, I think you're just you're adding fuel to the fire over here. I don't think you're helping this. You guys are you're holding it wrong in the immortal words of Steve Jobs. But Slack isn't email though. Like, and I think you mentioned like asynchronous. That's exactly what the type of work that doesn't work with Slack very well. Like if you're all in the same channel and chatting about the same thing at the same time, I think Slack works extremely well for that. But like using it for stuff that you don't have the ability to go back and get to, like, it seems like another tool is needed, or another tool in Slack is needed on top of that to make that work.
I think a lot of it has to do with the way we're using Slack. And I don't know how many companies use Slack exclusively.
Yeah.
We don't use any email at all. So all of our company communications, 100% of it goes through Slack. So maybe that's where the rub is.
It could be. And maybe you just need another piece or another tool in that tool chain, like a to-do list or something that's company-wide. You probably already have that.
I just need to mark threads as unread. I've been asking for this for like ever, and I got it. I'm happy now. I'm good for a while.
All right.
Anyways, sounds like I'm not totally alone.
Yeah, there's two of you. Dozens at least.
That's right. Small sample size. All right, Seth. Well, what do you say we jump into some home tech headlines?
Let's do it. Well, big news this week on the custom installation side. Multiple sources are confirming to Strategy, that's where we get the story from, that Nortec Security and Control is planning on shutting down two of their big brands, Sunfire and the once iconic Niles. The move is said to be the result of relative underperformance as the company shifts its focus to the apparently more successful brands such as Elan. So, end of an era, Jason. These are Niles. Niles goes way back, way back.
Yeah, this really does feel like the end of an era. I remember back when I was just getting into the business, it would have been probably about 2006 was when I got my first integration job, and Niles was our main brand. We did a ton of Niles at that first company that I worked for up in the Vail Valley here in Colorado. And I remember at the time thinking it was so cool, and it was. I mean, this was 2006, and Niles was a big deal back then. And yeah, this feels a little sad to see it go.
I remember in 1979 is when they first started with the industry's first speaker selector switch. So there you go.
Going way back.
1983 had a volume control that wall mount volume control. So these were all kind of like basic. Niles kind of got fancy. I remember those like IntelliControl systems they had. Mm-hmm. I would always be pulling those out. Somebody in town installed a ton of those through the 90s and early 2000s. I pulled a ton of those things out, but man, it's unfortunate. I remember working at Circuit City and seeing the Niles brand name come through on like maybe a speaker selector switch, and thought, who the heck is that? You know, that's a weird name. And one of the guys said, no, they've been around for a long time in home audio. So this is truly the end of an era.
It is. And some colorful language here from our friend Ted at Strategy. Under the more industrially centric Nortec, over the years, the innovative blood flowing through the veins of these top CI brands slowly began to drain. Almost as though in slow motion, we watched the business level and the market impact of these brands and their respective entity value wither away. I always enjoy Ted's writing. He's got a flair for the dramatic. By the way, nice facelift on strategy.com. I don't know if you noticed that, but that site was super dated and looking fresh now. So if you're listening, Ted, nice work.
Yeah, good job. Yeah, I will say the Rock speakers over at Niles, they suck. Don't buy those.
Don't buy those.
I've had
There's your PSA.
so many of those things go bad. Yeah. Ugh. But they warranty them. So you just call them up and they ship you new ones and they say, send us a picture of the old one after you put a sledgehammer through it. Okay. There you go.
There you go. All right, moving on here. The Consumer Technology Association has announced its decision that CES 2021 will be an all-digital experience. The Las Vegas-based show, planned for January 6th through the 9th, has been a global stage for innovation in the tech community for more than 50 years. CES 2021 will continue to be a platform to launch products, engage with global brands, and define the future of the tech industry, says the association. So nothing shocking here. The one comment I had was, it wasn't that long ago, Seth. I don't remember exactly when it was, but it was recently. I remember talking on a show and CES was still in the press saying they were moving forward. They were telling a confident story, and I don't fault them for that. I'm sure they were trying to keep things moving and hoping that they could, but I'm not surprised by this.
Yeah, no, I'm not surprised at all. I mean, and there's a lot of downsides to this. It's a show that brought a ton of money into the Vegas area.
Mm-hmm.
200,000 attendees normally came in, or 182, I guess is what they say here in this story. But on the positive side, this will be the first CES that I attend.
Can you cue in what's the drum sound effect there after a bad joke? There you go.
Google has invested $450 million for a 6.6% stake in security company ADT. The company's announced this week. The deal, which is expected to close in the third quarter of the year, will see ADT's technicians selling and installing Google's Nest smart homes devices, such as cameras, smart displays, as early as this year. Homes and small businesses are said to be two target markets. Pretty interesting development there. ADT I could have written off, but Google seems to, well, I mean, they've got a pretty large install base, so I mean, kind of lines up with what Google wants to do.
Yeah, this was not a totally surprising partnership, but it is interesting. It says eventually Google says its Nest devices will become the cornerstone of ADT's smart home offering. And some background on this, if people don't recall, back in 2017, ADT teamed up with Samsung to offer SmartThings powered home security system. We're going to talk about SmartThings a little bit later in our mailbag section. Also earlier this year, the brand launched a range of security cameras under the Blue by ADT brand. So according to a spokesperson cited in the story, ADT does plan to continue selling its Blue by ADT devices as a standalone system. However, it does appear that Google devices, Nest devices, will become their mainstay in the smart home.
I want to say that wasn't Monitronics one of Google's like security companies that they picked? Like, I guess they rebranded to MONI, Moni.
I vaguely recall that.
If I remember correctly. Yeah. I'm trying to search it, but I'm not coming up with anything. But I thought they launched their Google security system with that. So it's interesting, I guess, in that respect that Google is kind of investing with a different monitoring company completely.
Yeah, it is interesting to see. So keep an eye on that one as it develops. Moving on here, smart home and lighting control provider Brilliant, who we just had on the show on our last episode 313. If you're interested in learning more about them, has launched a new smart infrastructure management platform designed specifically for multifamily communities. The offering includes a new enterprise software and automation tool suite compatible with a wide variety of first and third-party smart home products and property management systems. Quick quote here from Aaron Amy, who we had on the show, says, "Our mission is to make smart home living accessible, affordable, and effortless for as many people as possible. With this launch, we're bringing cost savings and ease of management to property developers, owners, and managers while offering tenants an unparalleled smart apartment experience." So I wanted to mention this one quickly. I enjoyed learning more about Brilliant when we had them on a couple of weeks ago, and they struck me as being very focused on this mission of theirs to bring infrastructural smart home. I think I just made that word up. But again, eschewing sort of that app first approach and really getting the smart home into the infrastructure of the building, trying to bring that to the masses. And obviously the MDU play makes a lot of sense for them. So this is an interesting release that I think the meat of this that I'm intrigued by is the tools that they're giving property managers and owners of these larger buildings to integrate smart home in an intelligent way into their offerings.
Yeah, we've talked to a couple of property management type brand or developed companies. I want to say, Point Central was one of them. I remember we spoke to recently, and then I think Properly was another one. I'm not sure where these companies are, but it seems like the rental and like MDO markets are just like untapped for smart home technology for the most part. Like this stuff could kind of like go directly into it. So will be interesting to see.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of greenfield there.
Definitely.
I agree. It says CA Ventures looks like a real estate investment company with $13 billion in assets, plans to begin including this new system in their apartment communities starting later this year.
Cool. Well, the market for integrators installing more home theaters may have just gotten a big boost with a recent deal announced by Universal Film Entertainment Group and AMC Entertainment Holdings. The multi-year agreement will allow for Universal Films to be available for home premium video on demand within 17 days, as long as that time frame includes 3 weekends. So interesting. We saw this big like kerfuffle between AMC and Universal over Trolls World Tour, believe it or not, when that movie was expected to basically land during the pandemic. Universal decided they would just go ahead and release it through all the streaming methods, and AMC got kind of mad about that and said no more Universal films in our theater. And now it seems like they've done some kissing and making up.
No kidding.
To get back together, and for great for us, because we get these movies in our home 17 days after. They should be in the theater.
Yeah, that's a big change, and you do have to wonder what the movie theater business is going to look like coming out of COVID, because this doesn't show any signs of letting up anytime soon, and that has to be one of the worst businesses to be in. I would imagine they're really struggling. So hopefully they'll stick around. We've talked about it on the show before. I enjoy going out to the theater. I rarely do it these days, but I would hate to see movie theaters as a whole disappear. I hope they maintain a place in our culture, because I do think there is something special about going to a dedicated theater and the experience that comes with that. So I hope they're able to maintain a position in that ecosystem. But I agree with you. This is a net win for consumers. 17 days is nothing. That goes by really quickly.
Especially now.
Yeah, no kidding. We're totally stuck at home. But yeah, as you mentioned, this does have to include 3 weekends. So however that works out. And yeah, this could be a nice little push. I don't know, CE Pro is saying this could bolster the home theater business. Mentioned day and date services such as red carpet cinema. Anyways, I think that ultimately the broader point here, of course, is that more and more people are going to be looking for great entertainment options at home without having to go out, and that will spell some more business, some more incremental business for integrators.
Well, all the links and topics we talked about tonight can be found on our show notes at HomeTech.fm/314. Hey, it's a pie show. While you're there, don't forget to sign up for our weekly newsletter, which includes even further analysis as well as the other industry news that may or may not have made the show. Again, that link is HomeTech.fm/314.
Absolutely. And don't forget, you can join us in the chat room live on Wednesdays, typically starting around 7 or 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Find out more at HomeTech.fm/live. We got a few folks hanging out in the chat room with us this week, and we always appreciate that.
Jason, got a nice long letter in the mailbag here. Let's open that up.
We did. You want me to take this one? Yeah. Save your voice?
Could you please? I'd appreciate it.
I'm happy to. I'm happy to here. So this one came in from Scott Remick, and this was sent a couple of weeks ago, actually, but we're just getting around to it as we were off last week. He says, I have to say that the message from Andy from Freeport struck a chord with me as well. This is going back a few episodes, you may recall, to a message Andy sent in regarding SmartThings and their move away from their current integration system and how that was alienating him. as a user of the system. So this struck a chord with Scott. He said, I too listened to that interview on Stacy's podcast in dismay, and it harkens back to a letter I sent you here at HomeTech not long ago. He goes on to say, Seth, I have to disagree with your position that everything is still early adopter and that we have to just wait until this all shakes out. The point I had made in my own letter to you was the issue that things aren't heading in a direction of ever settling, or he doesn't feel like they are. SmartThings has actually been around for 7 years now, not 5. You know what else came out in 2013? 4K TVs, and our 4Ks still early adopter products now. There's an interesting thread we could pick up there. He says, no, but we're past the early adopter stage. The problem isn't just the tech, but the company's lack of commitment. One would hope that after investing in a 7-year-old IoT platform owned by a company as big as Samsung, that it would be a safe bet at this point. But nope, they're upending the whole table and screwing over their 45 million plus users. He goes on to describe he's got a lot of SmartThings devices in his home and how this is affecting him, and goes on to talk about Apple and some of the qualms he has with them as a company. So I think he makes some interesting points here, and it's a worthy discussion, I think, to jump into. The point of, are we still in the early adopter phase in particular, I think is a really salient one. And I don't want this to sound like a cop-out, but I do think that it depends which lens you're using. I think certainly as a user of the smart home, to say that things are still early adopter can feel off-putting. He makes some valid points, but SmartThings has been around for a while. He should be able to work with that company and have, as a user, feel like that company is committed to him and looking out for his interests. But I think from the macro perspective is where, Seth, I know you were coming from, and you've made this point a bunch of times on the show, that it is still early from a macro perspective. So it's an interesting dichotomy of experiences, and it really depends on which angle you're looking at the market from.
Yeah, and I'd have to agree 100% with him. One would hope that investing in a 7-year-old IoT platform owned by a company as big as Samsung would be a safe bet. I'd have to agree with him there, but I mean, the same thing happened with Google, right? And Google Nest. Like, they decided to basically, in their Works with Nest program, screwing over millions of customers as well that relied on those integrations. Now they provided an integrated path, but there were a lot of like stories on our end where like, will Control 4 have a driver for it? Will Savant be able to integrate? Will Josh AI be able to? Like, there were a lot of traditional integration companies that had a big question mark over the top, because Google announced it in such a way where they didn't work with those Nest partners to make that decision. They just did it. So, they, in the end, I think they came around and made that right in so much that you still have to go to those systems and upgrade whatever device or service was working with it. I know at least with Control 4, the integration is different, but again, it's if you look at the macro side, like you're saying, it is super early for this. I mean, if you look at electricity, we've had lights in our house since 100 plus years. If you look at plumbing, we go back to the ancient Roman times, right? If you look at roofing, you're going back to, guys in the Stone Age, right? Like putting mud on top of a hut or something, like roofing. These things have all played out over time. And I'm not saying you have to wait, 10,000 years to get a good smart home. Like, this stuff is progressing faster, but the Edison light bulb company doesn't exist anymore. They got bought out and rebranded, and it's GE, and GE has sold all their light bulbs over to Savant now. So like this stuff always changes. It's always moving. It is early in the respect that like this stuff isn't mature. It doesn't do what you want it to do, but it isn't early for, to expect something like something like Samsung to keep a product that has been around 7 years working. But at the same time, I mean, Scott is framing this as a lack of commitment. Really, Samsung was taking this angle as an angle of, we've got to improve our product. We've got to be moving forward with it for what is attractive to the most amount of people. And while I understand that means that a lot or all of the older integrations aren't going to be working, These are sometimes necessary steps that have to be taken to guarantee that, next year, when everybody's clamoring over whatever Google Nest is doing, that tons of SmartThing customers aren't leaving for another platform. I guess that would be my counter argument to that. Like you have to protect your product. And right now it's so early on that people can move between SmartThings, Google, Amazon, Apple, fairly easily. If you're buying a smart device these days, we've talked about this before. It's almost expected that it work with those platforms. If it doesn't, then you may go look at something else. So it's still early in my opinion. It's tough to say that because I wish, I want to go back to that Bane. You remember Bane on Batman was like, you weren't born in the darkness. I was born in the darkness. Like, you just found it. And I sound like Bane now, but like,
you do. That was great.
But like we've been around in this industry for 15 plus years. We have history with product like Niles. We just talked about Niles has been around since the late 70s. They're disappearing. Like there's no guarantees on any of this stuff right now. And it's tough. And until there's like a ubiquitous standard, until there's a light switch, how easy you buy a Leviton light switch, you buy a Lutron light switch, they both click on and off the same way, right? They maybe have different patented pending, mechanisms inside, but it's still known how that works. And we're not there yet. We're just not there yet. When you go to the store and you buy PVC pipe to do plumbing, you have your choices of sizes from 1/4 inch, but 1/2 inch, 3/4, 1 inch. And all of those pipes have specific things that they do within your home. And like, we don't have that with the smart home right now. We just don't. And so until we're at that point or closer to that point, we're just still, to me, we're still in an early adopting phase.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that you make a lot of great points. To come back to Scott's perspective, super frustrating. I can only imagine like the frustration that would come from having, and he describes his setup and it sounds, fully integrated and like he's spent probably a ton of time putting that together. So I empathize. And I think a couple of points. Number one, I've been certainly not anything on the scale of Samsung and SmartThings, but I've been a part of a couple of product changes and some sunsetting of certain things. And anytime you have to make these changes that are in the interest of your business, it's a hard decision. And we can only speculate as to how serious SmartThings took this decision, how rigorously they looked at options to make it smooth or potentially even provide continued support for people like Scott, and what sort of criteria they had to use to evaluate those options. And again, how rigorously they looked at those, we can only speculate about that. So that's number one. It's tough for companies, and companies do unfortunately find themselves in positions where they have to make a decision between what they perceive as being best for the viability and long-term future of the company and upsetting some users. And that's a really unfortunate reality in any industry. That's not unique to the smart home. I think it's also interesting to ask the question, SmartThings is part of Samsung, but I don't have any sense for
Are you going to ask where the Galaxy Home is? Like, is that what you're going to ask? Because I'm really
well, there's that, certainly. But, how big a part of Samsung, how much organizational energy do they actually get relative to the company Samsung? Perhaps there might even be a dynamic, when you say they're part of a company as big as Samsung. Interestingly, it might actually work in the opposite sense, where Samsung, being such a big company, is is looking at the bottom line and is looking at SmartThings as one small piece of a much, much bigger puzzle. And maybe there's organizational pressure to make some changes too.
Absolutely. You saw this play out with Google and how Google acquired Nest, and Nest just languished while the Chromecast team was knocking it out of the park with like these really cool devices. You could almost do better things than the Google Nest brand could do. And until they woke up and put all of those siloed organizations together and made them work together and put a leader on top, nothing really happened. And what happened was they put they put somebody on top and they put all the pieces together and they said, we've got to end this old API for Nest. It doesn't work with all this other stuff. And they had the same situation happen. So it's really, really tough. I mean, at this level, when you're talking millions of affected people, when you do, push out an update, it's really tough to make these decisions. I am not envious of anybody who has to run this kind of thing.
Yeah. So in closing, it certainly doesn't excuse anything. And I know a lot of SmartThings users are feeling pretty roughly handled right now. And I would never discount that. So I think you can only hope that they took this decision seriously and that they truly looked at all their other options. And I don't know, I'm not technical enough to know what sort of implications would have been involved for them to, say, continue supporting some of these mechanisms or find a middle ground, or, you go out to the far extreme of like, was there some way they could have open sourced some of this so that their more hardcore users could continue down that road? I don't know. Again, all of those things are very complex when you start to unpack them, but feel your pain, Scott. And definitely, I think it's something that all these companies struggle with. Interestingly, as you were talking, Seth, I was thinking about companies like Control4, and now owned by SnapAV, but prior to them being rolled up into SnapAV, I got an opportunity to know some of the very top people at Control4 and had similar conversations about these issues of long-term compatibility and backwards compatibility when you do updates. And I know for Control4, again, going to the very highest levels, this was a core part of what they saw as part of their culture and value prop was we never want to leave people abandoned. We never want to do anything that's going to leave any of our users totally out in the cold. So I think there's something to be said for working and looking at companies like Control4 that have been in the business for a long time and that this is the thing that they do, versus Samsung, where, again, SmartThings is one tiny piece of this massive puzzle. I think you get a different experience at the corporate level, and that plays out in changes like this.
I mean, it still happens with Control4 too. I mean, they updated to OS 3 and an entire range of product line had to drop off. It just couldn't run the interface on it. So you actually had to remove controllers that were less than 7 years old. I can tell you that. Fairly modern.
Oh, interesting.
You had to remove them out of your project completely and then put the new EA version in. And we're not talking for a controller. We're not talking, $50. I mean, we're talking a few $100. I don't know. How much is an EA one? Like $600 or $700? I don't know. Throwing the number out there. If you had 3 of them in your project, I mean, that adds up pretty quick.
Yeah.
So,
so even a company like Control4 that is really has to make those tough decisions sometimes is kind of the takeaway there. And then ultimately, I think one other thing that I would respond to that with is there's either situation sucks, to just speak frankly.
Oh yeah.
But there's a difference between saying, okay, if you go buy this new hardware, then you're going to be up to speed and all your stuff is still going to work, versus my understanding of the SmartThings change is that literally the way these integrations are built is going away.
Exactly.
So those are two related but different things. It's interesting to compare those.
Yep. It is not. Yeah, it's not. That's why I kind of took that position last week. It's just there's no good answer here. There really isn't, and I'm still kind of in that position. I don't really have a great answer for any of this, when it comes to long-term decision making. It's put your, cart behind whichever horse that
you got to place your bets.
Yeah, exactly. Put your bets on the horse and watch it. You got to watch it race around the track. And if it doesn't make it, it doesn't make it. I mean, it comes in last, but it's still.
Well, it's also interesting. Like, we've had a couple of these conversations over the last few weeks, and the more we sit here and talk about this, and again, we talked about it recently, the more I think that for a user like Scott, looking to a solution like Home Assistant that's open source is attractive, because it solves assuming the system can do what Scott wants it to do. And of course, putting aside the tremendous amount of time and energy and money that would have to go in to migrating all of the stuff over, which is all very real. But zooming out and just looking at where do you go where you don't have to worry about this sort of thing happening to you, open source seems like an attractive answer to that.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It's frustrating. And I can absolutely feel the frustration in this email letter that he sent us. I mean, it is very frustrating. And I'm not saying that like it is what it is. You have to live with these decisions. There's no good decision. There's no good answer right now. And I'm not saying that lightly. Like, I wish there was a good answer. I wish that there was this magical API or a magical standard that everything worked with. And when you put a device in your house, it just worked, but we're just not there. We're just not there yet.
Right. So Scott, thank you for reaching out, and hopefully that conversation shared some of our perspectives, and would love to hear a follow-up email from you if you have anything additional to add. Maybe we can even get you on the show at some point to discuss what your plan is as somebody who's been directly affected by this.
Love to find out what he ends up doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Shifting gears here, Seth, we got a pick of the week on your side.
Yeah, so I've got this noisy little air conditioning in the garage here, little floor air conditioner that I picked up for a few $100s at Costco. And it's got an IR remote with it. And sometimes you can see me reach over and like turn it on and off if it gets particularly hot in the garage here. Well, I've always wanted to be able to like automate that somehow. And since it's IR, I was like, well, I'll just bring a Control 4 controller out here. And I never did that. I never wrote a driver for it or anything. I'm not that adventurous. But what I did find on Amazon, believe it or not, is this device called Sensibo. And it makes your dumb IR controlled air conditioner smart, or as smart as an IR air conditioner can be.
Right. Little qualifier there. Yeah, this looks cool. I think super useful for a lot of people in your situation using like a standalone air conditioning.
These
unit.
are extremely common, like not this standalone, like, but the mini split systems, which are all IR controlled, extremely common throughout the world.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so this is kind of neat, and it's $120, which is pretty reasonable, I think. Says compatible in every country, any voltage power outlet, takes less than a minute. Got a bunch of the big brands listed on here. So go check this one out. And Seth, I'm glad to hear that, hopefully this will help you keep you from dying of heat exhaustion in your garage in Florida in August as we record.
Well, what it does do is, this little unit will just run 24/7 if I let it. Like it's
right.
Not very smart. It's got some kind of temperature thing on it, but I've never seen it actually turn off. But what this will do is it will it's got a humidity sensor and it's got a temperature sensor. So it can actually calculate the feels like temperature, and you can adjust the room based on that. So like if it feels more than 79, turn on this little unit and you hear it beep and crank up and turns on, and then it'll turn it off. So it's not like I'm running it 24/7. It's just like it'll turn off for a few hours and turn back on at night, just to kind of like get the humidity right in the room. So it's kind of nice in that respect.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, it's well worth it for $100 just to toss in. I will also say, it has Alexa, has Google, has Siri shortcut support, but it also has a full API behind it. I think Alan Chow has written a Control 4 driver for it. So yeah, it's a really, it's full open API. It's got all these graphs and stuff if you want to go look at it and kind of entertain yourself looking at graphs. I guess it's got that too. So
go geek out on some data.
Yep.
Cool. Well, good little point solution. Nice pick. All right. If you have any feedback, questions, comments, picks of the week, one event about a manufacturer leaving you high and dry, ideas for a show topic or guest, we would love to hear from you. Our email address, feedback@HomeTech.fm, or visit HomeTech.fm/feedback and fill out the online form.
We want to give a big thank you to everyone who supports the show, but especially those who are able to financially support their show through our Patreon page. If you don't know about our Patreon page, head on over to HomeTech.fm/support. to learn how you can support Home Tech for as little as $1 a month. Any pledge over $5 a month gets you a shout out on the show, but every pledge gets you a big invite to our private Slack chat, The Hub, where you and other supporters of the show can gather every day for discussions about, lighting control was kind of big this week. James posted a video to a webinar he did in there that was really good. If you're in the Hub, go check that thing out because it's really good.
Very cool. And if you're looking for other ways to support the show, we would appreciate if you would take a moment to leave a positive review on iTunes or in your podcast app of choice. Those reviews definitely help more people find the show. So if you find value in what we're doing here at Home Tech, please take a minute to go leave us a positive review. We would really appreciate it.
Well, Jason, this week we had a couple of surprises. Niles, Sunfire shutting down. We had CES going digital. You had your own surprise. I was watching you on Twitter, and you went out fishing one morning and ran across a friend.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I did. I had a moose encounter, and that's not a super common occurrence and kind of a scary one. We were, as listeners know, we were off last week. I took my wife and I took our kids up to the mountains here, Grand Lake, a really beautiful area in Colorado. And yeah, as anyone with young kids knows, vacation with young kids isn't really like vacation when you think of without kids. We're constantly moving. We're going a million miles an hour. And so I did sneak out early in the mornings while we were up there to go fishing. And the one spot that I had some luck in one day where I did succeed in catching a fish, it was our last day there, and I was walking to go back there. And as I'm walking down the road, just kind of looking around and minding my own business, I look up and there's a big moose standing right literally where the footpath was that goes down to the river. Like 20 feet from where he was standing was where I was hoping to go fishing. And the whole encounter lasted maybe 5 seconds, just enough time for me to quickly snap a couple of pictures. He took one look at me and meandered off, thankfully, because they can be kind of aggressive animals.
I was about to say they're massive, and it seems like one of those, like either a bear or a moose. I don't think I know what to do because I just...
Yeah. It made my heart stop for sure. And I started walking backwards right away and kind of looking around to figure out what I was going to do if he came at me. So thankfully he didn't.
Yeah.
And I stood there for about 5 minutes debating if I might be able to go fish down there if I waited long enough. And then I decided that was a really bad idea.
Yeah. Well, it would have been funny if you just, it's worth the risk. I had one there yesterday. So
Yeah. Yeah. So I went and fished elsewhere and didn't have any luck, but it was cool to see kind of a unique experience. And I'm here to tell you about it. So That's a good thing.
You have photographic evidence and saw a moose. So.
That's right. Cool. All right, Seth. Well, we'll wrap it up here. Hope you have a great weekend and that your voice gets to feeling better soon.
Gonna drink some more tea. See if that helps. It seemed to help for the first part of the show, and then just nosedived after that. So, oh well.
Yeah, well, you hung in there. We appreciate the fighting spirit.
Yep. No, this is my Cedia voice for this year. I'll try not to do this again.
Get it out of the way now.
Yep. Alrighty.
That's right. All right. Well, have a great weekend. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll talk to you next week. Take care, Seth.
All right. Have a good one.